I just started recording, but
oh, okay, cool.
The big thing is going to be when Ryan and Chris talk. So
yes, thank you for doing that. From a Windows perspective, we had a couple of new blogs on new AI capabilities within the Copilot Plus PCs. Aria has actually got a great blog out there on the transparent controls that are coming around things like recall and some of the new other AI capabilities built directly into Windows 11. So that's a good, interesting read for you.
Actually, I want to actually hammer on that point a bit more, because recall, sure. If you didn't know, or some of you have probably seen already, if you follow Reddit or any social media, that recall is now available for Copilot Plus PCs. It went GA this past or last week with the non-security update that went out. So that it's turned off by default for managed devices. That blog post goes into great detail on how to manage and control it. As Garrett just mentioned, highly recommend you take a look at that just to understand. But if you're not running Copilot Plus PCs, you won't have to worry so much about recall, because it's only going to come to those devices.
Yep, good call. The only other one I wanted to highlight was RSA conference is actually this week. Microsoft has a decent presence there, being how involved in the security community we are now with our solutions. But what I thought was really interesting is the new Edge for Business security connectors. And there are now connectors to be able to use Edge for Business, which is just a flavor. It's not really a new install or any new product or solution, just a managed browser, right, from a managed device. That is essentially Edge for Business, where we can now leverage third-party connectors to device partners and identity partners within the ecosystem. So this will actually achieve compliance with those other solutions. What's interesting too around this is actually there's a number of IDPs that now are going to be able to support these connectors directly within the Edge browser, but one of them being Clever. And so I know a lot of the K-12s on this call are actually utilizing Clever, and so I think this will be an interesting add-on to be able to support a greater level of control and security within Windows, specifically with those other IDPs when Entra isn't your IDP. A few other ones out there like Tanium, Omnisa, etc. They all now have some connectors, so I would encourage you to look at those and see if that is of value to you and your organization to be able to leverage that. But this will tie into things like conditional access policies, etc. So really cool stuff. Scott, I'll let you talk about the next slide.
Yeah. So one of our commitments, many of you probably have heard of or may have read in the media that Microsoft, we have what's called a Secure Future Initiative, and I'm sorry I misspelled that, but the Secure Future Initiative is an initiative here at Microsoft to improve security and in all aspects, everything from development to working with our customers. So what is part of or I guess part of fulfilling my commitment and Garrett's commitment to security is we want to help educate you to, well, one, we want to help you achieve zero trust with all of your devices. Some time ago, there was this is a open source on GitHub, but there is a device workshop that is maintained by some Microsoft employees. It's on GitHub, and there's different modules on there that are part of zero trust. And the goal of this is to give you a plan. You know, everybody, we talk about zero trust, but it's like, how do you actually achieve zero trust, and what does that look like? So yes, Leaf, I know you don't trust me, but that's okay. There's a lot of people who don't trust me. But the point of it is, what we want to do is to help empower you and give you some tips and tricks and a plan to get there. So what we're going to do on Tuesday, May 20th from 2 to 4, we're going to run a 2-hour session and review the Zero Trust Workshop for devices. And a lot of this is going to cover Windows security. It's going to cover Intune and virtualization, but how you can use, how you can basically get to Zero Trust using the tools that you currently have. The workshop is free. You can just click on that registration link. I'm going to drop the registration link in the chat, but would love to have you attend. And again, it's this is the first time we're doing it, but I think it'll be a lot of fun. It's going to be an interactive session. Lots of questions, a lot of feedback. We're not going to, again, the purpose of this here is to make sure that you're using all the security features in your tools so you can secure the devices in your environment. And Garrett, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, that's it. Go ahead and sign up. Should be a fun event. Sure, go ahead and forward the link. The more the merrier. All right, with that, I did not ask Chris or Ryan if I could use their pictures, but I did it anyway, so I hope you gents forgive me for that. But we're excited to welcome you to EDU Endpoint Office Hours to talk about Autopatch. So I will turn it over to you guys.
All good. And yeah, you're welcome to use that photo. I definitely look a little younger there. I think that was the year I graduated from university. So it's, yep, good memories.
Yeah, perfect.
But yeah, no, thank you for having us in. I appreciate it. And yeah, no, I'm actually really, really stoked about some of the changes we've been able to, bring forward to folks especially like the EDU world, because that's near and dear to my heart. I've been working on essentially bringing Autopatch groups, Autopatch reporting, and those sorts of features to EDU for probably about 12, 18 months now. And sorry that my screen isn't sharing. For some reason, present in Teams isn't working, so I'm going to have to do this the old-fashioned way. Give me 2 seconds. And so please, let me know if anyone is having issues seeing things or anything along those lines. If you have questions, raise your hand, jump in, all that sort of stuff. I'm on a single monitor today, so I won't necessarily, I'll be jumping back periodically after a couple of slides to do things, and I'll go through the deck here around what is Autopatch, and then we can talk more about what the console looks like and things after, because I was just going to do a walkthrough of the things that'll look different that are coming out. So what is Autopatch? Folks are aware of Windows Update for Business, Windows Update for Business Deployment Services, all that sort of stuff, as well as this service that we worked on called Windows Autopatch. That's all been essentially consolidated into one brand called Windows Autopatch. And it covers what was previously the deployment service that controls which content is offered to which devices at what time. And it's all about figuring out which content goes where, as well as providing automation in terms of the client policies and just really helping land some smart defaults on different devices. And that's what we're looking at. So from there, you can use it directly through Intune. There is obviously Windows 10 update ring policies, driver policies, feature update policies. Those are things that everyone's had access to in the past, as well as things like Autopatch groups, which are a way to configure updates across multiple content types. And we'll talk more about them in a couple slides, as well as reports and other areas there. So why did we do this consolidation? It's really all about getting a single place to manage your updates. So everything gets, going in one spot. You can see all your devices, you can understand which ones are going. And generally our principle is there are 2 ends to the spectrum. You can do everything yourself with individual policies, set up your own update rings. You can essentially have as much control as you want over every component of the service. There's nothing that we're saying, hey, this is always going to be Microsoft's responsibility. Or you can essentially use automation and intelligent defaults in Autopatch groups to try and simplify your life when you're setting up rollouts. So folks have heard me mention Autopatch groups a couple times now. What are they? This is an example one where you can essentially say you have a faculty group and you want to roll out, you have, I don't know, 1,000 devices in there or something. And you want to roll out in a more gradual way to prevent impact, balance speed and safety, and make sure that your line of business apps are working properly. An Autopatch group lets you take that faculty group, and then we'll distribute it into smaller chunks and actually create entry groups so that they're reusable and all that sort of stuff for the Autopatch group. Create policies, and we have some recommended intelligent defaults you'll get to see later, but can do that. And then with those policies, it'll set up a rollout for you. You can scale that up and have multiple Autopatch groups to divide your environment into different areas and really make sure you have the control you need, as well as safe rollouts. From there are things like Hotpatch, which is a technology to help you deploy patches, security fixes, essentially without a reboot. And the advantage there is that you're just productive and protected right away. You don't need to wait for that reboot, and it makes it easier to track compliance. There are obviously some caveats with Hotpatch, like you need to get on the right baseline first, you need VBS enabled, all that sort of stuff. But that's all available as part of Autopatch. And then lastly, there's some awesome reporting that comes with it. So I figure instead of staring at slideware, I'll stop there for a second, ask if there are any questions on what Autopatch is with that 3-minute summary before I dive into the console and just kind of show people around. Does that seem reasonable? Sound like a good plan?
There's a question of what is VBS?
Virtualization-based security. It is a Windows policy. I'm going to be honest, I'm not an expert in it, so that's about my level of knowledge of that particular setting. I just happen to know it's a prerequisite for Hotpatching. All right. Cool. So now I'm going to dive into the console. I think everyone's fairly familiar with this. And then you can click Windows Updates. And this is where all of the Autopatch features live, but this is where you can see essentially a lot of the Autopatch features. The Releases tab is focused on what's the content that's in flight. And I apologize in advance. This is a test tenant. There are a whole bunch of fake policies and things that don't look pretty, so it's not going to be the prettiest example ever, but this is just, my test tenant sort of thing. And you can see which content's being deployed, how we actually are releasing these various things into your environment, and then what are all the different policies that are managing that content. So this has been available for a while. From there are update rings, feature updates, quality updates, driver updates, and then a monitoring tab. So in each of these, you'll be able to configure individual policies. So say you have an update ring. One thing that'll look different if you create an Autopatch group is that the Autopatch group will create multiple update ring policies. So you can see them grouped together, and it looks just exactly the same as any other update ring policy usually does. The difference is that they're nicely grouped, and you can kind of see what was going on there. So how do you create one of those? How do you create an Autopatch group? It lives over in tenant administration. From there, you can click on Autopatch groups, and we can go create a new one. So let's just say this is faculty. I'm going to call it engineering faculty, because that's what I did. Apologies for the typing. And so here's where earlier I mentioned you can create essentially a dynamic distribution. I'm just going to grab some random intro groups here, pretend these are my engineering faculty list. And then I will say I want to distribute across these rings, add my default distribution, and then what'll happen is any devices that get added into these groups are picked up by the Autopatch service, and then Autopatch distributes 1% of them into this engineering faculty ring 1, 9% into this ring 2, and 90% into ring 3. If you don't have thousands of devices, it might make more sense to do something like a 10, 30, 60. But yeah, you're fully in control there. I don't know why that's being so difficult to click on today. And then you can use assigned groups if you have, say, lab that you're wanting to test into, or you have some VIPs who you want to go last. And in the event that you have a device that is in the dynamic distribution pool, as well as in your assigned group, the assigned groups always win. So that way it would end up in ring 1 regardless of if it was in here, if you assigned to a dynamically distributed group. From there, you can select which update types are enabled. For an Autopatch group, quality updates are always enabled right now, but if I didn't want to apply a feature update policy because you manage that separately, just untick that box or leave it on. And then you can choose to include or exclude Office and Edge. And then we get into deployment settings. This is where you can choose like which version of Windows do you expect these devices to be on, which strategy you want to use for driver updates. We recommend automatic approval, but some customers want to manually approve these things. M365 apps and Edge, and choose your rings here so you can control all of that. And then from there, you'll see there's essentially presets, and there are things like information worker devices, shared devices, kiosks, billboards, all that sort of thing. And based on the number of rings you have, as well as the preset you've selected, it'll fill out these values for you. So say I chose a shared device. I'm going to apply the selected template. You'll see this change to a scheduled install and restart. And this lets you edit. These are all settings that just exist within Windows 10 update ring policies, but it lets you edit across multiple Windows 10 update ring policies in line, so you can set up that safe rollout as you're getting into essentially what the desired behavior. So here we'd say, hey, we don't want you to restart between, this is setting the active hours to be from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. So avoid restarts in that time period unless they've hit a deadline. And so then you can see and configure deadlines, deferrals, grace periods across the different content types and all that sort of stuff. So that's what you're seeing here. And then from there, there's scope tags, and RBAC is a feature that we have basic scope tags in place right now, and then there are additional capabilities that we're looking into in the future. So that's kind of work in progress. And then lastly, you'd review, see all the policies we're going to go create, and then based on the role of the person who is currently using it, if you have sufficient permissions to create the intro groups, create the policies, Autopatch would actually go ahead and create all of these policies for you in order to manage your device, manage those devices, as well as create the intro groups to assign to those policies. So that's the test ring 1, ring 2, ring 3 here. That's generally what an Autopatch group is. And that's one of the new capabilities that is coming online for EDU customers. Essentially as we speak, I believe the rollout is mostly complete. So there are still, I don't know, maybe 30-40% of customers it's still rolling out to, but it's in progress. The other major area that's new for our EDU customers is quality and feature update reporting. So from here, you can see, again, pardon my messy test tenant, but you can see that there's a historical trend to begin with. Within reports, you can see device status, and this lets you see specific desktops, what's actually going on. Are they part of an Autopatch group? Are they not part of an Autopatch group? Which deployment ring policy is managing them? What's their update status? I'll talk more about the states here in a second, as well as specific versions. Device readiness is, do we even expect this device to be updated or not? As well as any alerts. Alerts are just a view of what's going wrong on this device. And so in this case, we see we don't have any diagnostic data from these devices. And so that's what we would need to go and address if we wanted additional reporting. So before I move on to talking about states, I'm going to pause for questions, see if anyone has anything they'd like to ask about. I see there's been loads of chat. Does anyone want to come off and ask me something?
Yeah, Chris, it looks like a lot of folks, I think, aren't seeing Autopatch yet, and Ryan had mentioned that even though we're in GA right now, we're still rolling out those
Yes.
changes to everyone. So not quite everyone's got it, but most people, I think, at this point do have it.
That is correct. Yeah. So we are in the rollout process. As I mentioned a minute ago, I think there's 30 or 40% of tenants that are still kind of happening, but it should get there pretty quickly. So I see someone's asking, does Autopatch policy take precedence over existing Windows Update policy? Can you expand on that? You're talking about like just you have Windows Update policies configured in the console?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
We got you.
If that's
Yeah,
the case,
so there's like Windows Update rings, and then there's like feature update, this feature update section where like on the service side, it like you can move to new versions of Windows, and if you have all
Yep.
that stuff turned on, do you need to turn all that off to do auto patch? Like, or does auto patch
so
like if you turn auto
congratulations,
patch
you are
on?
already using Autopatch. All of those policies are Autopatch.
Okay.
So that is part of Autopatch as a service.
Okay.
For an Autopatch group, it's just a way of organizing those policies together. So that way, you can administer more of them at the same time in an easier way. So say you had a Windows 10 update ring policy and you wanted to set up like a 5-ring rollout. That's the advantage of an auto patch group is the service creates those Windows 10 update ring policies for you. And here I'll just actually go back to the section so you can directly see it. Because the console should look more or less like this right now for you, where you have individual update rings. Right now they'd be down here. And again, sorry, it's the test tenant. You're seeing ugliness that doesn't exist in the real world. But like this is just a regular old update ring policy, which says, and sorry, again, test tenant, so the names are kind of rubbish, but it looks exactly the same, right? And then if we go back to an auto patch group, and again, sorry again for the test, for this looking bad, you can see that it's exactly the same policy that's being created. There's nothing magic here. It's just there's an experience around being able to edit multiple policies in the same flow. So that way, if you want to go back and change your deferrals and really be able to see what your rollout looks like, that's where Autopatch groups help. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. So let me go back and chat and yeah. Why is there no option to add all devices when you create an Autopatch group like there is at different built-in locations in Intune? Good question. That's one where I'm not actually 100% sure. I would need to check and get back to you on that particular ask. Generally, folks have an all devices group kicking around, so that's one I will just take as feedback and get back to you because
My guess on that, Chris, is that because in Intune, all devices and all users are actually virtual groups. They're not actual groups in Entra. So there's probably no way for you to actually query those quote unquote groups. But if you were to have made a all devices group in Entra and
then that would totally show up.
Then that would work.
Yes, that makes loads of sense because we are completely dependent on at least for dynamic distribution and those features I mentioned in terms of taking devices and moving them into other Entra groups so that we can do that assignment and distribution for you. We're totally dependent on reading from Entra and all of that.
Yeah, but I think one of the questions, though, kind of going back to Mike's question about, what takes precedence, like if I've got a bunch of update rings already and I've targeted, things to those because I haven't had Autopatch and now I have it. I create an Autopatch group. I start deploying rings to that. I'm going to have conflicts, most likely. What happens when I have those conflicts?
So conflict management, it's actually a great topic. For update rings, conflicts are resolved in the exact same way conflicts are resolved elsewhere in Intune, which is not particularly prettily. So
Right.
if you've got a device that is a member of, multiple update rings, I can't tell you exactly what the behavior is going to be because Intune handles conflicts slightly differently each time. It depends on which settings conflict and all that sort of stuff. So if you've got a super well-established area, then a lot of the benefit of Autopatch groups is probably less. The benefit will really be in the reporting, because you'll start seeing your devices show up in the reports just using update rings, because update rings are Autopatch. They're every policy in Intune that is to do with updates is Autopatch. I've had access to Autopatch for a long time. There's just 2 new features called Autopatch groups and reporting that folks now have access to. In terms of how conflicts are handled with things like a feature update policy, because that's controlling content, the way that that's resolved is that the newest version wins. So if you have an approval for Windows 11 22H2 and for Windows 11 23H2 and a device is in both of those policies, then the newer content is the one that will be deployed to that device. So that's a different behavior than an update ring because the mechanism is slightly different on the back end in terms of where the actual offering goes. So yeah, whenever we're dealing with content, it's the most up-to-date version that is targeted to that device will win. And when we're dealing with CSPs, which is Windows 10 update rings, that is the standard Intune CSP behavior, where if there is a conflict, then Intune kind of says, go figure it out.
Right.
In order to avoid conflicts, you can exclude the Entra groups created by Autopatch groups from your other update rings if you want to take that approach of using Autopatch groups.
So
Does that help?
Yeah, so the guidance would really be like if you like your update rings today and they're working for you, there's really there's no need for you to create an auto patch group. Just keep doing what you're doing today. Now you can take advantage of the new reporting capabilities that we've also included through Autopatch.
That is entirely correct. We're not prescriptive about, hey, this is the best way to go do things. We're much more in line with, hey, this is another option for you to go ahead and use if you're setting up, say, new departments, or if you want if you are struggling to maintain your rings, then that's another way that you can go ahead and manage things, is just migrate to an Autopatch group and then exclude the Entra groups that are created from your update rings. It's whatever works best for you. Back to that slide we had where it said, do you want to be in full control or do you just want to use the defaults that Microsoft puts out there? So that's at least how I represent it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Now, one other question to this. So we've got the auto patch groups, right? And so we've seen how those get created. We've seen the 130, 90% or whatever it shows by default there. But now with my update rings, today update rings are kind of confusing for some people because I don't know the best way to do my update rings. And so as we go through Autopatch, the screen we're on right now, if we go to quality updates, this is where we're actually giving you the templates for the different use cases that you might have, right? So we've got the information worker, the shared device. And so each of these is creating an update ring policy that is particular to that type of scenario.
It's actually creating multiple update ring policies. So if we go back to the deployment rings here, where Autopatch creates one Entra group for each line item here. So there'll be a test-test Entra group created. Sorry for my terrible naming. Then there'll be a test-ring 1 Entra group created. And then Autopatch takes devices out of whatever Entra groups you put into the dynamic distribution. And then, based on some percentage, applies them to the newly created Entra group. From there, when you say enable this policy type, you're telling Autopatch, I want you to go create policies for that update type. And then each line item here, so this is test, that's saying I'm going to go create a update ring policy that will manage my client update deferrals and my client deadlines and my client grace period for that particular ring. And I can go in and edit that directly here. And then there'll be another update ring policy created for the second stage of the rollout. And the value there is a deferral of 1 day instead of 0 days. And that's how you can create that safe and gradual rollout across multiple rings. Does that answer your question?
Yep, it does.
Yep. And you'll see that I think, at least what I've heard, the update ring policies themselves are fairly confusing because they have settings that span across multiple areas. So within this UI, the update, install, reboot, and notification behavior, these settings are all part of Windows 10 update rings. And getting them to do exactly what you want is actually kind of challenging. And so the UI that's happened here, or that we've got here, is all about trying to simplify how exactly you can get that value that you're looking for out of an update ring. So that's generally what's here. And so this would configure that specific update ring. So yeah, that's how that all plays out.
Yeah, so for those of you that have had challenges with, like what are the best settings for my update rings? Autopatch will help you depending on that workload, like the drop down that we have right there.
Yep.
That helps you with those. Now, as you probably are aware, Chris, in the education space, it runs the gamut for all the different types of usage, right? You have the information worker, you've got the shared devices, you have labs, kiosks, you have shared carts with students that are in K-12 space. And so we've got all these different conditions. And so the presets there definitely help, but when I see the presets there and then I look at what we have right below that, are the presets, because everything I see right now says schedule, install, and restart. But if you talk to you're on the WSD team. If you talk to some folks on your team, they'll say, well, if I'm managing devices that are for my information workers, generally we want them to just kind of use the default Windows update settings because of intelligent active hours.
Sure.
Do we handle that scenario for the information workers?
Yeah, totally. So here, essentially, if you click automatically install and restart, this is using intelligent active hours. This is doing all the basic, essentially, the let Windows update do the right client settings for you. If you move into the scheduled install and restarts, you want to have slightly more control over when our device is going to reboot, how is that all going to work. That is where you get into configuring your own active hours rather than using intelligent active hours. That's where you scheduled install and restart comes in. I'll be honest and say these aren't as powerful controls as maintenance windows within Configuration Manager, which is a thing we've heard from customers that they want. So that's awesome feedback. If that applies to your world, please let us know. We're always open to feedback. But that generally is how that fits in. And so for shared devices, when you see the switch over here at the top in terms of the update behavior, yeah, it's because you don't want that cart to be based off of intelligent active hours. You actually want to be able to say, no, I really want to avoid reboots between 5 a.m. and 9 p.m. So I'll schedule all my reboots overnight. The only time that stuff gets overridden is if there's a deadline. And deadline policies are important. And this is where if you get into like a reboot sensitive device, you'll see that deadlines are actively not configured because that will override the scheduled install and restart options that you configure. So that's where the presets are there to help. And then you as the admin can finalize the behavior you're actually looking for.
That's great, because we've seen a lot of, engineering through blog posts where blog posts will get written about these are the best settings that you should use for Windows updates, and people don't always read blog posts. So
yeah,
having the settings built into Autopatch definitely will help.
Yeah,
all right, we got
that
a lot
was
of
the
chat
idea
going.
with pulling them in, is
Yeah.
try and make life easier, and then also as we continue to develop, because the Windows Update client settings, those are used by Autopatch. Autopatch owns the policies in Intune. There is essentially any update policy is an Autopatch policy. We can get smarter with our presets too. So, let's imagine a future world where there are more powerful maintenance windows. We can pull that in as new capabilities within Autopatch groups. If we wanted to separate some of the policies out between different content types, we could look at how that plays together in Autopatch groups, where when we're dealing with single policies, it's a lot harder to set up those standards for people, because that, it's really the interaction across multiple policies that sets up the rollout.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. We have some questions going in the chat. I know Ryan and Garrett and Scott have been helping answer some of those. Is there anything we missed?
So I see a question
I
about
think
we're
there
not
was
an
one
Intune.
regarding Office updates that I posted. I didn't know the answer to. If I think it was, it was like if you have your update policies configured by, let's say, config.office.com, and you want to have the update schedule there, does Autopatch override that with the new setting?
It's the other way around. So there are different options in terms of, are you using cloud updates from Office, or are you using a more traditional ADMX style management within Intune for Office?
Okay.
Autopatch right now uses essentially the settings catalog approach. So there are some settings within Office, and let me just I'll just navigate there so you can see what it actually looks like. And what Autopatch creates. Sorry. Again, test tenants. But you can see Autopatch creates we have a whole bunch of Autopatch groups in here. This is used in a bug bash. So yeah, and so you can see within the configured settings, there are a whole bunch of policies we create. There's where do we pull the updates from? What's the delay on, do we delay downloading and install updates? This is configuring a deferral, same as you have for quality updates. There are some caveats with Office I'll go over at the end. Enabling automatic updates, we want to make sure that's true. Hide the option to disable, that's essentially take the option for an end user to opt out of automatic updates away. Hide the notifications. We want people to see notifications. Generally, there's just some guidance around how does this all work, and the same principle that we mentioned before in terms of, yes, you're going to want to be able to configure updates across multiple rings and have multiple policies, and Autopatch is just trying to help you do that. So these, if you're using cloud updates totally overwrites everything that is configured here. And we're actively talking with the Office team about cloud updates, but that is essentially what we're building at the policy level, and there are just multiple policies for each Autopatch group based on your settings. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that was.
That was my question. Yeah, that answers it.
Awesome.
One follow-up to that. So if I were to modify something here, like the channel name, if I want to go current channel, does Autopatch flip this back to monthly, or is this a point in time?
No, this is like the principle is, it's your policy. Like Autopatch just helps create it and helps recommend defaults and all that sort of stuff. Okay. So once we've created it, we're not going back and checking that policy every single time and making sure that you haven't modified it. if you do something like go and edit the Autopatch group and then resave, that's where, like, if you're modifying like the Office policy and in the Autopatch group UI change this from 2 to 3, then it may flip it back to monthly enterprise, because that's not yet a value that we support as within Autopatch groups.
Right.
But we don't actively go through and reset values or flip bits back and forth.
So, okay, so then taking that a step further, if I were to change like the enable automatic, well, that's probably a bad one, but hide the option to enable or disable updates. If I were to change that to disabled, and then I modified the Autopatch group and modified something within Office, like change the deadline from 2 to 3, like you mentioned. If I did that, the thing that I changed to disabled, would that still stay disabled, or will it flip it back to enabled because that's what the default policy says to do?
I believe, and this is where I would want to go double check with the devs after our latest changes. I believe that it would reset that when you're modifying Office policy. So if you did the 2 to 3 thing, it would reset these to defaults. But I would need to go back and double check that to be sure. So let me just ping someone on the side here and see if I can get you an answer while we're still on the call.
Cool. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, because I could definitely see someone coming in here. They'll see the policy within Intune. They'll make a modification to it and then not think about it for months, and then have to make a change to their Autopatch group. And they might modify one of these Office settings that's totally unrelated, and then now they're back to some other setting, and they didn't realize that was going to happen.
Yeah, no, that's a very valid point. And we do have a line in our docs saying, please don't modify our policies, or you do run the risk, or don't modify the policies by hand outside of the UI in the Autopatch group, because there's always a risk of us doing something bad. As far as I know, at least like with update ring policies and those, we are like, if you just modify in an individual setting, we'd understand that and read that back into the Autopatch group, because we're trying to use the policy as a source of truth. Office and Edge are the cases that I would say are the least developed at this stage.
Okay.
So that's why you're hearing me be a little more cagey about these ones and not know the answers as crisply.
Got it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good. We got some more questions in the chat here.
Yeah. I see. Sorry to go for recency bias here, but would Autopatch work with universities that have decentralized IT? I see there are scope tags. Was not sure if there were more things to be aware of. Seems like the answer is yes. So the response to your question is, would it work? Yes. I think the other thing and the other feedback I've heard in the past is that some people are using scope groups and not just scope tags. Within Autopatch groups, that makes it a little more challenging because we're actively creating intra groups, and we don't apply scope group tags to those intra groups at the time of creation. So that's a thing where if you are using scope groups as a part of your RBAC solution, that you need to be aware of, and that is feedback we've heard. So just be aware of that and know that we are tracking it. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
I see a question about changing the apps channel. Will it be supported by Autopatch groups in the future? Richard, I was asking in private chat, is this call under NDA or is this a private call?
This is, do not share anything under NDA. This is a public.
Okay, great. Call. Great. That just make sure I can answer things a little more crisply because I don't want to accidentally look at things. Yes, we're looking into it. I have no particular issues with channel changing. The general things we're looking into are around cloud updates. How do we integrate that? With cloud updates, that's where we'd bring in things like moving towards current channel or the other channels that are involved there. And then there's a separate chunk of work that we're looking into around specifically channel changing. And we also want to tackle Office reporting, so that way we get the same style of reporting that we have for other areas. So that's the whole big bundle of stuff that we're looking at doing for Office, which I should call M365 apps for enterprise, because that is the correct term. But yeah, we are definitely looking into that. So I see this one from James Barnes asking about co-management, device configuration policies, and all of that, pointing out that folks may only have the Windows Update policies moved over. And yeah, no, you're totally right that to have all of this moved over and use these policies, you would need that co-management setting moved over. That's one of the reasons we actually, so before EDU got access to this, you didn't have the option to opt in and out of specific workloads at the Autopatch group level. So if we move here, the ability to uncheck this is really a feature we heard from our co-managed customers, where they're like, hey, I would like to not flip that fully over and be able to just manage these update types, because those are the ones that are dependent on that. So yes.
Thanks.
So it's available to which licenses? So the change is that we've aligned essentially the VL story to, we've changed the VL story so that it's A3 plus, as well as Business Premium E3 F3. And essentially, as long as it's tracked at a tenant level. So we haven't differentiated between student use benefit and A3. Does that make sense? Sweet. Any other questions that folks have? Please go ahead, James.
I just raised my hand and asked this time. So this is not really something that needs like a reference documentation link. Is there any information on how the distribution is decided upon on the back end for the rings? And likewise, is there any information on, say, is there any information or automation that exists in general for, say, ring one, you start experiencing tons of errors for an update applying? What automation there might be for delaying those further rings or pausing that update for further rings, or is that something that would have to be manually acted upon once that like threshold is reached?
So actually hitting the pause button or anything there, that is a customer responsibility. Like we've tossed around ideas about, hey, what's a threshold for when you could automatically pause, but it got very complex very quickly, because we'd need to become aware of like, oh, okay, this is a finance situation and they care about the reliability of Excel rather than the reliability of PowerPoint, using bad examples here, but to make a point. And so became very specific. So what we've done with Autopatch groups is there is a pause all rings button. So you don't need to manually go in and pause each ring like you need to do today. So that's available. But we don't have an automatic pause. In terms of the logic around how devices are distributed, the percentages are what you see, what you get, for lack of a better word. So we grab all the devices, and I say devices very intentionally there. We don't have user group support in here just yet. But we have all the devices from as many device groups as you want to include in the dynamic pool. Take all of those and then use math to say we're going to take 1% and put it into ring 1. And then we're going to use 80% and put them into ring 4, or whatever configuration you put here. The 1%, I'll be honest, this is really designed for customers with really big volumes of devices. So if you've got 1,000 devices, I'd say probably you want to put 10% in this first ring to get appropriate coverage to start with. Does that answer. I can't remember if you had a third question in there or not, but hopefully that answered what you were looking for.
Yeah, you hit on the main two things I was asking about, the distribution and the actual, any sort of automation around pausing with very elevated error rate.
Sweet. Let me see if I can just demo how that works on the pause side of things while we're waiting for the next person to ask a question.
Well, actually, I want to put a comment on that too. So Chris, when you're creating those Autopatch groups and going through what you just showed, we're also creating an entry group alongside that, right? So all of those are entry groups that we're making.
Yeah. So
right.
So you could actually
groups. You could see the devices as it's creating that. You can see all the devices that are in the groups. So as a end user or as an IT admin, I could go in there and actually modify. Like if I don't like what Autopatch grouping did, I could go in there and modify and add a device, or I could remove a device and put it into a different one if I wanted to, right?
You can. The thing I think about is with dynamic distribution, the way I'd recommend to pin a device to a specific ring is actually use the direct assignment capability rather than moving the device in or out, because the group during the next, like we're constantly scanning every hour the devices in the dynamic pool. So if a device goes missing from that dynamic pool and is like moved between groups, then we'd pick that up and it'll be either okay or get redistributed. And then as new devices come online, then they'll be added into those other groups. Good question. And to close out that last topic, if you want to specifically put a device in a specific ring, you can use the direct assignment capability in the Autopatch group to say pin devices in this entry group into that specific ring, and that will, even if there's a conflict between the dynamic pool and the assigned group, the assigned group will always win.
Got it. Okay. Makes sense.
If the group is deleted, great question. What happens is in the Autopatch group blade, you will see a not pending assignment. Sorry, that's a different thing. Do I have any? You will see a failed here. Oh, this is an RBAC failure, but you would see that it is in a failed state. And then when you go in to actually modify the Autopatch group, you need to resolve it before you can actually make edits to the various policies that are in there. So there's a restore button, and then that would go ahead and redistribute devices back into that group for you, redo the assignments, make the group healthy again, and then move forward from there.
And I do think actually we're at time right now, so it is 2. Looks like some folks have to drop for another meeting. But thanks a lot, Chris. I think this was outstanding and very helpful. I know a lot of customers here appreciate everything that you've presented here today, and all the work that you've been working on for the last 6 to 12 months, trying to help us get Autopatch in for EDU. So everyone, give Chris a round of applause here, because this was awesome to get this all in. And now that it's in, you guys need to use it. So so use it, help us out, help us help you. And yeah, so again, thanks a lot, Chris, and Ryan, for both being here today.
Yeah, and don't be strangers. Like, I really appreciate feedback on this stuff. I try not, I don't want to build anything in a vacuum. So if there are things that don't work, or if there are things you want to work differently, please let me know. We want to have your feedback, and you guys are an important customer group to us. So let me know what we can do for you, and we'll, like everything, it's always competing resources and backlogs and all that fun engineering stuff. But thank you all for taking the time to sit with us and let me ramble on for half an hour. And sorry, Ryan, for not tossing the mic over more often. Appreciate you, man, in the chat.
You were on a roll.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. And thanks everyone
for
showing up. We'll go ahead and get the recording out and then the slides and everything. But thanks again, and we'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. Fill out the form too, the feedback.
Yes.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care.
All right. See you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.